CLNS Media with the best day of the week, college football recap and preview, focusing on the draft eligible quarterbacks. This show is brought to you by our friends at SeatGeek and FanDuel. More from them later. But first, check in with my co-pilot for these draft shows, Alex Barth. Alex, how are you doing today, brother? And since this is technically a Patriots show, if you got any thoughts on the current quarterback situation, controversy, whatever the hell you want to call what's going on right now, feel free to share.
Yeah, how's it going, Taylor? It's, fitting that we're going to come on here and talk about quarterbacks because, look, Mac Jones seems to be past the point of no return, setting up for them to bench him. There was a report from the Boston Herald that he's spiraling, and you can see that in real time, and it can be so tough for quarterbacks. And I'm somebody who obviously believed in Mac Jones at the beginning, and I do think the issues with him are more about his setting than him personally. I do think it's more of a nurture thing than a nature thing with him. But here we are. It's looking like they need I'm not saying that I was struck today like, oh, Mac Jones is the future, and then today he gets pulled to practice. Oh, no. But it's another one of these days where it's like that reality setting in of they're going to be back in that quarterback carousel this offseason, and it's going to be the draft. Like, I know some people have floated the idea of Kirk Cousins, 36 years old, coming off a torn Achilles. There's no future there. You don't have any talent around him to maximize the current window. Like, no, thank you. They got to go to the draft. Maybe you go get a guy like Baker Mayfield or Jacoby Brissett is like a bridge guy, but no, the next, true franchise quarterback for the Patriots is coming from the draft. And the consolation, I guess, if you want to call it that, is if there is a year to need a quarterback, this is it, because the last 2 years in the draft haven't been great draft classes. This is as good of a class as we've seen since that 2021 class, which obviously didn't turn out as well as we thought it would. But in terms of your options, in terms of the number of prospects, you're going to have more chances to kind of hit. You're going to have more darts to throw to kind of try to hit and find that next quarterback.
Yeah, it's unfortunate too, man. And this is like the whole Mac Jones experiment really emphasizes how this offseason needs to be focused. Like, there are plenty of holes on defense that need to be addressed as well. But offensively, they cannot, whether it's Jacoby, whether it's almost definitely a rookie quarterback that they take in the first round, that guy needs to be set up to succeed with the offensive line and with his weaponry, because what they've done for Mac Jones in his first 3 seasons is pretty much malpractice. And yes, he's exacerbating issues. Yes, he's spiraling and all these things, but it all starts with the organization, because he is a young player who needed to be guided in this league. And unfortunately, we're seeing that was not the case. But this is a happy show. We just had to acknowledge the fact that, we're probably going to get a shakeup at quarterback for the Patriots, just to underline how important it is to be up to date and have some idea what's going on with these quarterbacks. So we're going to start with our recaps. First guy we're going to take a look at was Bo Nix. It's a big, obviously, rivalry weekend. Played Oregon against Oregon State. Now, Bo went 33 for 40, 367 yards and 2 touchdowns. It was another one of those kind of Bo Nix performances where a lot of the throws are just kind of things that, underneath, really just doing his job, not making bad decisions. I did like that I saw him use his legs a little bit. He ran some. He had a couple throws on the run. Doesn't have great arm strength, but he can get the ball there. He had one across his body. And then I thought he had a couple of nice tight window throws and one nice layer throw. He had a couple of defenders in the area and lofted it to his guys. So what did you think about his performance, and did it sway you one way or the other in terms of where he could get taken?
I think more what we've seen from Bo Nix, there was definitely a little more of a playmaking element from him in this game, but he's still, I think that ceiling is capped. And like you said, it's a lot around the line of scrimmage. Through 12 games, his average depth of target, his ADOT, is 7 yards. That ranks 37th among qualifying quarterbacks eligible for this year's draft. So, yeah, I think more what you saw from him. I think the selection committee saying that the part of the reason they have Oregon over Texas is Bo Nix completion percentage is absurd.
That is insane.
Yeah, the 2 reasons they gave were Bo Nix's completion percentage and that they beat Oregon State. Look, I think Oregon State's a good team. I do, but if the only 2 qualifications for making the playoffs are a high completion percentage from your quarterback and beating Oregon State, then we need to talk about Arizona as a playoff team. Shout out to Jet Fish. But this week, and we'll get to this week, I think is bigger for Bo Nix. It's that redemption shot against Washington. He continues to do what he needs to do. I don't know that there's so much, and the numbers are obviously good, but again, a lot of it's after the catch, things like that, scheme touches. I need to see him go out there and really sling it again for him to go over the top and really seal himself as a first-round pick. Again, I don't want to spoil too much getting ahead, but like, again, it's all near the line of scrimmage. What I still need to see from him is, and I don't know why more teams aren't doing this. Teams step up, take away the inside stuff, take away the go routes, or take away the short stuff, take away the go routes, and force him to test the intermediate and deep parts of the field over the middle.
I haven't seen
And
that.
so far, right. And a lot of that is just because of the other playmakers Oregon has, and Oregon has a lot of great playmakers. And it's not just Nix you're trying to stop. Obviously, we're talking in the context of the draft. These teams are trying to win games. But I wonder if that's what Washington's going to do this week, if that's how they're going to play and really get some pressure on Bo Nix. So we'll see. But again, another good performance from him. He's up there for the Heisman. I don't think he should win it, but he's up there for the Heisman. He's doing what he needs to do. He really hasn't had a bad game at all this year. And in a year that has been a roller coaster for a lot of these quarterbacks, up and down, Nix and Michael Penix, the two quarterbacks we'll see Saturday night or Friday night, have been the picture of consistency. And I think you value consistency in a quarterback, and that might be Nick's best trait at this point. But the top end playmaking stuff, it's just, if it's there, he's not doing it right now. So it's tough to kind of put that check in the box for him, which is big when you're talking about the modern game. You want quarterbacks that are going to go out there and not just distribute the ball, but be playmakers.
Yeah, especially if you're talking about a guy who's going to come in and be expected to kind of carry the franchise, because a rookie quarterback's not going to be perfect, but you at least want somebody who, okay, if they do miss their first read, if the protection breaks down, like if something does go wrong, whether it's because they're young or because something else fails them, you'd like them to be able to succeed outside of that structure as they find their way in the NFL and start to learn what they can and can't do, as opposed to like a Mac Jones type where obviously, the processing and all the things he was praised for in college, they showed up his rookie year, and that's why he was able to have success. But then we saw as the pieces around him started to deteriorate and the system around him, obviously last year was dog poop. I almost said the other thing. But,
Right.
When those things are against him, he couldn't really do anything more. And that's not his fault. But you'd like to see somebody who can elevate themselves. And it's why, for me, Bo, like quarterbacks always have, their value is heightened just because of the quality of the position and how important it is. And with a guy like Bo, for the reasons you said, I just don't think he's a first round guy. I think he's like fringe second round. And that's just because he's hyper consistent. And you're like, okay, I pretty much know what's going to happen if I plug him in. But, and again, because it's just a position where you need a guy and some teams are just going to be pretty desperate, I'm sure he'll get picked earlier than that. But if we're talking like what he brings to a team, I do not think he's a first round quarterback. And again, I think second round is generous, and only because he doesn't have glaring red flags.
So the only way I see Bo Nix going in the first round is, and this is the kind of team that should take him anyway, but I look at a team like San Francisco that has all the pieces in place. Maybe they don't want to pay Brock Purdy. Maybe they know, hey, in 2 years, we're going to have to move on from this kid and let's just get the next guy ready. And maybe 2 years, a little bit of runway, a little bit too much runway, especially with a guy as old as Bo Nix. But like a team like that, or maybe if the Jets trade back up and they say, hey, look, we've got these receivers. We've invested in these receivers. We have a good defense. If Rodgers doesn't come back from this Achilles, we want a guy that we can plug in. Bo Nix is basically the guy that if everything else is figured out,
you're good.
You can plug him in and be comfortable that he's not going to make a mess of your offense.
Exactly.
That he's going to get the ball to the guys he needs to get the ball to. So the thing is, the teams with a ton of talent usually also have a good quarterback. There's not that many teams. I don't know, Taylor, maybe I'm missing one. I'm trying to think off the top of my head, but how many teams? There were a couple the last few years that it was like, okay, they're a quarterback away, and it feels like they've all gotten quarterbacks. Maybe the Falcons. If you really believe in Drake London and Kyle Pitts, you say, all right, we're going to plug Bo Nix in here into the Arthur Smith offense, where it's a lot of play action. It's a lot of, just get out and deliver. Maybe something like that to kind of, Geno Smith's on the older side. All right, we got DK Metcalf, we got JSN. That's the kind of team that should be looking at Bo Nix. If you're the Patriots, where you still have what are you plugging Bo Nix into? That's he's not real. And most teams picking high in the first round, they have other needs. So again, for me, these are the kind of teams that I look at for Bo Nix. Could one maybe get eager and move up and get him at the end of the first? Yeah, I think so. But to me, that's like a day two pick.
Now that you said Arthur Smith's system, I'm starting to think he's kind of like a safer but less exciting Ryan Tannehill. Where like I think Tannehill has a better arm. I think he's a better athlete. Obviously, he's play wide receiver, but he kind of has a brain fart every once in a while where you're like, dude, literally, like you just had to not mess up, and you did. Whereas I feel like Bo Nix, again, not as electric. I'm not going to necessarily say Tannehill's electric, but in terms of athleticism, he's not quite there. But I think he is a bit safer.
I think
moving
when you go. Sorry, you go back to like when the Titans were kind of breaking out with this group, and that would have been what, like 19, right?
Yeah.
When Derrick Henry was on the ascent, and they had Tannehill. Remember Tannehill was like in the MVP conversation there for a couple of years.
That was a wild time in football.
Such a perfect fit. Like that to me is like what you want with Bo Nix. Like that to me, he can be that guy.
Yep, I agree. All right, you mentioned Michael Penix.
It's not me saying Bo Nix is going to win an MVP, but it's like if you put him in the right system and allow you to
important distinction.
They went to the playoffs. They came into Foxborough. They beat the Patriots in the playoffs. They knocked off the Ravens, and then the next year they were the 1 seed. And like ultimately, did they ever win a Super Bowl? No, and some of that was because of the cap on the quarterback. But again, that's just the kind of thing I see Bo Nix doing. Where it's a good run game. He's got a couple good receivers, right? AJ Brown was there. And he's just going to he's not going to get in the way of it. He's not going to get in the way of anything. He'll add a little bit, but the biggest thing is he's not going to get in the way.
Agreed. All right. Mentioned Michael Penix Jr., so we're going to talk about him. Had, by his standards, a pretty day. Rivalry game against Washington State. Went 18 for 33, 204 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. Now, this was, I felt like in terms of Penix, I didn't think this was a game where we really saw anything similar to Bo Nix, where there wasn't anything that was, oh, wow, I learned something from this. It was more like I'm looking right now. He had a couple of pretty wide open shots. His interception wasn't his fault. He was trying to fit it into a tight window, give his guy a chance. His guy didn't capitalize on it. But, he made some of the throws he had to make late to make sure that they were able to win the game. He had a nice throw to Rome Odunze for the touchdown. And there was a sack late in the game. I kind of was iffy about his ball security there because it looked like he was a little loose with it. But again, for me, it didn't really move the needle one way or another. It's like, yeah, it was Michael Penix. It was a tough game. And I don't know much about Washington State's defense. So I'm curious what your thoughts were on the fact that this was a 24-21 game. So it was a competitive one against a team that, as far as I know, I don't think Washington State's ranked. So what were your thoughts on his performance there?
Yeah, well, just rivalry week as a whole, and I meant to say this before the last game. These games are always close. It really doesn't. It sounds like a cliche. You throw out the records, it really doesn't matter. You saw Alabama go toe-to-toe with Auburn. Georgia struggled with Georgia Tech. Oregon State were close. I mean, those are two better teams, but like this is just kind of what rivalry weekend is. Now, they're not always all so close like this, all coming down to the wire, but they're not your typical, one team has 8 wins, one team has 4 wins. It's going to be a little closer than that. Usually it's going to look a little closer. On Penix, so I talked about the consistency thing. Yeah, I think Penix has been super consistent. Still, this might have been his worst game. I did really like the throw to Odunze. I thought that was, textbook him. I don't know what they were doing late in the game. So they have the ball 5 minutes ago, tied at 21. They're driving down the field. He does make a really good read. They ran this kind of weird read option where off the handoff, he like flips the ball behind his back to Odunze on a 4th and 1. I don't know if you saw that play, which is a great read by him and a ballsy play. And I love that. But then, all right, they're like well in field goal range against a tie game with like a minute and a half to go. And he's making these really aggressive throws, and he should have been picked off once or twice. And he just wasn't. Would have been game losing interceptions probably. I don't know if there's something up with the kicker or whatever. I don't know why they were calling passes in that situation to begin with. But when they were, you'd like to see him, handle the ball a little better. I wonder if maybe it was make a last case for the Heisman thing, and they wanted him to throw the game-winning touchdown kind of a stat pad. Whatever it was weird, and I didn't like it. Now, I'm not going to let that undo the whole evaluation of the player, but it was for a guy that I think has been very composed. To see him make some of those decisions late in that game was very odd. I don't mind the whole thing at the end where like he couldn't watch the field goal. He's an emotional guy. We know that. I've said this before. I like my quarterbacks play with emotion. Penix plays with his heart on his sleeve. That's great. I love it. It's awesome. That sequence at the end of the game, though, was weird to me. I didn't love seeing that.
Yeah. And especially with a guy like, you think about someone who's kind of emotional, and first thing that comes to mind because of recent history is Caleb Williams and like going up to his parents after the game and all that. And I'm not saying anything against Caleb, but with Penix, I think, yeah, you see that he doesn't want to see it. But like you said, emotion can be good for a quarterback, especially when you see how much his teammates rally around him and what his presence is like on the field. So that isn't super, I would say, alarming as a sign. Something that's maybe notable if you're really trying to like get through the weeds and find like you start splitting hairs. Is there's a whole phrase for that. But yeah, definitely a weird situation late. But I mean, the body of work has been very good. And like I said, I personally didn't see anything where I was really alarmed or thought that I should really move the needle for him one way or another. But you're talking about how rivalry games are close. Not to undermine you, but I'm going to talk about a game that was not close at all. Texas versus Texas Tech. Texas Tech, 57-7. Now, this is one. Quinn Ewers went 17 for 28, 196, touchdown and interception. Archie Manning came into the game because it was 57-7. But did you see anything from Quinn Ewers? Because obviously, he wasn't catalyst for a 50, near 60-point game. But what did you see from him in the time that he was on the field?
Yeah, he's coming back from that injury. I think he looked good. I think it's just a good sign that he got back on the field. This is a guy that's now dealt with injuries, shoulder injuries 2 years in a row. So for him to come back, for him to throw the ball, I'm more interested to see what he does this weekend. The interesting thing for me with Ewers is the decision. So it's been reported that he's going back to school. For him to do that, then come out and play. This is a guy that's still trying to win national championship, still trying to win a Big 12 championship, all that. I just like the mentality of it. I like the mentality you see that he went out there and after a rough season dealing with injuries, probably not even when he's healthy, the performance level he wanted, he expected, the team expected, he's still out there putting it on the line.
Yeah. Yep. All right, not going to spend too much time on that one. All right, next up, we got Michigan State versus Ohio State. Michigan won 45-23. J.J. McCarthy went 12 for 24, 263 yards and 3 touchdowns. Showed off some of his athleticism. He made some plays with his legs. I think the throw that people were really praising him for, the touchdown down the seam, I didn't love that because it seemed like he was trying to move the safety. Safety wasn't biting. He throws it kind of blindly, knowing that he's about to get hit. And the safety, as soon as the ball gets let go, turns around. If the guy just stands there, it's an easy interception. So I saw that getting a lot of praise, and I'm like, yeah, I don't know about all that. It was a tight window because he made a bad call. But for the most part, it seemed like he had a pretty solid performance. He did have some nice throws in the game as well. What did you think about how he played against tough defense?
It was better. I mean, everybody knows that my thing with McCarthy is that Michigan's hiding him. They let him throw the ball 20 times. So that's more, it wasn't the Penn State game, right, where he threw it 8 times. He made some nice throws. Again, you see that potential, but like you mentioned, there was a good chance there for that to be an interception. There's another throw a lot of people are talking about where he's rolling to the right, kind of blindly throws back across his body. It's completed, but that's not a throw you can make as an NFL quarterback. So still looks very raw to me. I do wonder, look, he led them down late for the touchdown, and that showed a lot of poise for a young kid. And I think that answers a question we had about him that we maybe didn't have the answer to before, but I still think he needs to go back to school. He's still very raw. His footwork was kind of falling out from under him at times. There were some questionable reads in that. I still think he's a project quarterback. Now we'll see what he does this week against Iowa. And again, we'll get to that, but and one other quarterback note from this game, Kyle McCord, who was a top recruit at one point, sucks. This is not good. Ohio State needs to get a real quarterback in the transfer portal so they can come back and beat Michigan because Kyle McCord's not going to.
Yeah, Marvin Harrison did his very best. He had some freaky,
he was awesome.
Alien, what you'd expect. Yeah, he was fantastic, man. He had some crazy catches in that game. All right, last but not least, the moment I'm sure a lot of people have been waiting for in the chat. I've already seen his name pop up. One of my guys.
Wait, hang on. Before your grand reveal, there's one more guy I realized I forgot to text you about that we got to talk about. Not a draft prospect, but I wanted to mention him. I don't know if you watched the Iron Bowl, Taylor. You saw.
I was traveling. Yeah, it was tough.
I'm sure you saw how Alabama-Auburn ended.
Oh yeah. I did not see the whole game, but it would have been impossible to miss that.
Jalen Milroe. We kind of talked about him a couple weeks ago. It's like, yeah, he's going to go back to school. Is his future as a quarterback? What is it? The way this kid has grown from getting benched in mid-September to what he did against Auburn last week. Again, I would be shocked if he comes out this year. He still has a lot of development to go, but boy, can he's a legitimate dual threat quarterback now. He wasn't nobody was respected his arm earlier in the year. He wasn't really giving them a reason to. I think getting benched really helped him. I think he got a week to reset his mind, to kind of hone his mechanics. Just got to give a ton of credit to the game Jalen Milroe played. And what a throw to win the game on 4th and 31, or 4th and goal from the 31. I got to give him his flowers, because it's been so much fun to watch him, these last couple of weeks.
Does he remind you of another former Alabama quarterback who was benched and then came back and showed a lot of grit to have a great performance and a great career afterwards?
Mac Jones? No, I assume you're talking about Jalen Hurts.
Yeah.
I think he's a better athlete than Jalen Hurts is. I don't know that Jalen Hurts has the speed and the elusiveness. He doesn't really remind me. You talk about, he's not
as a prospect, more in terms of like the mental makeup and like being able to bounce back in that regard.
I think that's fair. Yeah, because Jalen Hurts, that was a big deal for him, the way he came back. So after that national championship game. So I'd buy that comparison.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that at that point in his career, Jalen Hurts was a better passer. And like you said, I don't think he was quite that athlete. But another guy who I think mentally, at least in his ability to grow and develop on a pretty rapid pace, Jaden Daniels. 16 for 24, 235 yards, 4 touchdowns. That was passing. Running, he had 11 carries for 120 yards, a 10.9 average. Everybody already knows he's a dual threat. He really showed it. Now, I will say this was a game against Texas A&M where I thought early on, I just didn't see a lot of NFL quality plays with his arm. I didn't see like a ton of anticipation. Granted, I'm watching the broadcast, so it's hard to really know. But I wasn't seeing like a ton of anticipation throws. I wasn't seeing any really challenging plays or anything like that. He was making stuff happen with his legs. But then in the fourth quarter, they were just like, all right, we're going to give you some go balls. Just sling it. And that's where all the touchdowns came from, and that's where they started to find some juice. What did you think of this Jaden Daniels performance? And as he is in a race for a Heisman, maybe the front runner right now after that performance, what did you think? And do you think he really does deserve to be as high in the Heisman debate relative to that game as he currently is?
Oh, yeah, he should win the Heisman. He's been outstanding, and it was cool to kind of see him settle in and kind of have that rough start and bounce back, because there's been other guys like Drake May. Drake May had a rough start this week, and we didn't get to him a ton. I didn't think he was great. I thought he had another down performance. Drake May didn't start great, and it snowballed on him. Whereas Jaden Daniels, and that's a game that, I mean, Texas A&M just fired Jimbo Fisher, right? They're bringing in a new head coach. I could understand how LSU might overlook that game, or at the very least, it's a tough game to prepare for. So I get it. He came out a little slow. Bounce back in the second half. Yeah, it's not Texas A&M isn't the most talented team, despite all the money they spent on NIL. Or if they are talented, they're not using the players right. But it's an SEC defense. It's a top half of the SEC team that he tore up. He was outstanding again. I talked about it before. Like he's the anti-Bo Nix, where that big play potential is just, there's so much. You just drooling seeing what he can do if he's put in the right situation in the NFL, and he flashed a little bit more of that. So, again, I see people in the chat talking about his size. That is obviously the chief concern. His size, and just does he take care of himself? He's very reckless when he runs the ball in terms of taking tackles rather than going out of bounds or sliding. But no, he's been. I said this year has been a roller coaster for a lot of quarterbacks, and I mean that in like. A lot of guys are not where they were when the season started in terms of draft expectations. Jaden Daniels, his draft projections hardly been consistent, but it's just constant. I mean, it's shooting up. It's just shooting straight up, and it continues to do that.
Yep. Real quick, Dane Brugler came out with his first mock draft. At number 2, he had the Patriots taking Drake May. Now, if you listen to the athletic podcast that he does with Nate Tice, they were also talking about Jaden Daniels and how he is shooting up draft boards. Like, the explosive plays that he's accounted for are insane. Again, like, I compare him to Hurts because Hurts is someone who every single year of his career has taken significant strides where it's like
Yep.
it's a completely different person. And Jaden Daniels, a lot of the talk is the same thing, where even when he was at Arizona, was it Arizona or Arizona State? I'm getting it mixed up.
Arizona State.
Arizona State, that's what I thought. Even in his last year there, you started to see him make strides. And then at LSU, he's not turning the ball over as much. He's still making the big plays. So, in that kind of conversation, because I'm having this debate in my head, do you take Drake May, considering that everybody just kind of agrees, it seems, that he and Caleb Williams are 1A, 1B? Or are you in the mindset of this, kind of where I'm at, where maybe, honestly, if you get a 2 or 3 pick, you trade back to the end of the top 10, maybe even top 15, depending on where Jaden Daniels is projected to go, try to get some more capital, and then get him there because he's still a really good prospect. And because the Patriots have so many holes, I think getting more capital is probably ideal for them.
Yeah, so I think the idea of, do you trade back a couple spots, take QB3, then trade back into the first round and take a tackle or receiver in that second tier? I think that's a real conversation. What I would add to that, though, is Jaden Daniels QB3 or is he QB2? I think
That's
there's
the
a real
thing. I
chance
think by
that
the time
we're all said and
QB2.
done, that Jaden Daniels passes in the eyes of some teams. I don't know that every team will see it this way, but all it takes is the team with the pick, right? The big thing is going to be when we get to the combo. So the Senior Bowl would be a big one for Jaden Daniels and honestly Drake May. He should probably go because he just hasn't had that performance against a good defense yet. We need to see him throw against top players. But when we get to the combine, does Jaden Daniels put on 10 pounds between the end of the season and the combine? And then if he does that, right, yeah, if he can get up to even 220, even if he puts on 5 pounds. But I'm saying, like, if he's listed at 215 in college, he's probably 210.
Yeah.
Exactly. Which we'll get to real guys usually weigh in less at the combine. But, like, if he can come in at 220 at the combine and still run, there's been unsubstantiated reports he runs a 4.4. But I don't know how realistic that is.
Is that what I texted you, that he probably runs a 4.48?
I think so.
Yeah.
Let me say that if he can get to the combine at 220 and run a 4.6, it's going to be, there's a real conversation about him and Drake May.
Yeah.
A real conversation. Now, we just don't have those numbers yet. And yes, playing quarterback at 215 in the NFL is a big ask, especially odds are a team drafting him doesn't have a good offensive line. He's going to get hit a lot.
Yeah.
But yeah, if he can bulk up a little bit and still show he's as athletic, there's going to be real questions about him and May, because right now I think Drake May's floor is a little higher. The ceiling's comparable.
Yeah.
I do believe the ceiling on the two is comparable. There's just a little less bust potential with Drake May because of his size. And I think the pedigree is part of it. Drake May was a 5-star recruit, originally committed to Alabama, all of that. Jaden Daniels, this guy that's, he's kind of had a journey, 5-year college player, had a transfer, multiple college coaches. That's sort of what's setting them apart right now. Jaden Daniels comes in and shows he has, can physically hold up to the NFL and interviews well. Yeah, he's going to be right there with Drake May.
I agree. And again, I need to watch y'all 22, and that's been my thing, is I'm trying to get my hands on enough tape that I can definitively really see these guys as quarterbacks, not as athletes, not as guys with arm talent.
Yeah.
Like, I honestly, having a good arm is great. Obviously, everybody wants somebody with an arm. That just doesn't do it for me. I need to see how you play the position, how you process the game. And from what I've seen, Jaden Daniels, in terms of like consistency and using his athleticism as a bonus rather than a crutch, I think that it's like him in a class by himself. And then it's like Caleb Williams and Drake May as guys who are more physically, maybe, I wouldn't even say more exciting, because like you said, Drake May, I think, is comparable. But yeah, I absolutely agree that he could really sneak up and make it a conversation. Before we get to the previews for next week, we're going to send it over to our friends at FanDuel. Be right back.
Score early this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action, NFL. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including you got spreads, you get your player props, you got over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/Boston and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL.
All right, so for next week, championship week. First one we're talking about, Oregon versus Washington. Now, this is going to be fun, little rematch action. What do you got?
So I like Washington in this game overall. I think when it comes to the quarterbacks, I kind of talked about this before with Bo Nix. Can he so I said his A dot for the year, 7 yards per attempt, 7 flat. Against Washington in that game, it was 6. So I need to see him actually test this defense a little bit. And I think the Washington defense should force him to do that. Come up, take away the short stuff, put your speedy corners on the outside against Troy Franklin, take away that 9 route, that go ball, and see if he can hit you on cut routes over the middle and the intermediate and deep parts of the field. If he does that, okay, we need to re-examine Bo Nix a little bit. I just think that's kind of the story for him. And I'm sure Oregon wants to come in and run the offense they've been running. Can Washington take that offense away? And if they do, how does Bo Nix adjust? That is the story of this game to me for Bo Nix. For Michael Penix, he's already beat this defense once. He beat him pretty good. Can he beat him again? And especially, it's what's at stake here. If Washington wins, they're going to make the college football playoff. Oregon, we'll see. Like, they could get it. If Washington wins, they're going to make the college football playoff. So he probably gets a shot against the Georgia defense or the Michigan defense. Like, what this is all about right now, from a draft point of view, I'm not saying this is how necessarily these guys view it, but this is how we look at it. Taylor, I say this a lot. I want the tape against the good defenses. I don't care what they do against these sub 100. I don't care what Michael Penix did against Arizona State. I don't care what Jaden Daniels did against Vanderbilt. I don't care what Drake May did against, I don't even remember if they played Pitt, but Pitt, like these bad
Unless
teams,
it's like egregiously bad. Unless it's egregiously bad against bad teams, it's like, all right, whatever.
You can't win against bad teams. You can only lose as a prospect. You can't win against bad teams. You can only lose. So can Michael Penix put himself in a position where, if he gets to go against Georgia and he has a good game, that draft stock's going to keep going up, right? Same goes for Bo Nix, but again, Oregon might get in with the win, might not. We'll see. Michael Penix, can you go out, big game? You don't have a home field advantage this time, neutral site. Vegas has Oregon as a 9.5-point favorite, which is mind-blowing to me. Can Oregon win this game? Yes.
What?
Are they going to win by 2 scores? That would be genuinely surprising. I think a lot of people are caught up in the Oregon mystique right now.
I know where I'm going with my money.
Right. So, exactly. There's a lot of weird lines. We'll get to some of these. There's a lot of weird lines in these games.
Okay.
Can Michael Penix come out, prove that what he did against Oregon last time is repeated? Oh, and that's the other thing. I meant to say this. You don't always often get to see a college quarterback face the same team twice in a season. And that's obviously something you have to do in the NFL. And we talk about this a lot in the NFL with the rookie wall. Once teams get tape on a guy, it becomes a little easier. Can Michael Penix beat a defense for a second time? Can Michael Penix beat a good team for a second time? You're talking about, these are things when we go and we debate what's going to be right now. Looks like we'll see where Daniels ends up at that second tier of quarterbacks. Daniels, Penix, Nix, McCarthy, maybe Ewers. These are the kind of things that are going to set him apart. NFL teams are going to be like, look at what he did the second time a defense saw him. Look at what he did in this big stage, in this neutral game. If he gets a chance to get against Georgia, hey, look at what he did against Georgia. Look at what he did against Michigan. So for Michael Penix, it's not so much this game can help his stock. It can, because again, facing that team for the second time, but he can get himself in a position to really accelerate his stock with a good performance in the college football playoff.
Yeah, so for Bo Nix, this is like, you could legitimately, make yourself some money, actually move yourself up. But yeah, I think for Penix, like you said, it is a nice test to see how he does in that kind of environment, but it's going to be more like the cherry on top, because I feel like we pretty much know what he is. All right, next up, we got Texas versus Oklahoma State. What do you got for us?
Yeah, so again, with Quinn Ewers, this is a really interesting one, because there's been a lot of reports that Quinn Ewers is going to consider going back to school. Which I get. He was supposed to be a first-round pick. If you don't know Ewers' background, some people call him the second highest rated recruit of all time. So he was a 5-star recruit, but he was like a true 5-star. Trevor Lawrence is the only other guy that's been graded as high as Quinn Ewers was graded coming out of college. Coming out of high school. That's it.
Right.
So this is a guy that came in with a massive pedigree, monster expectations. Look, he's been good. But Quinn Ewers' story wasn't supposed to end with him being a day 2 pick and fighting for a starting quarterback job, in a middling.
What
Supposed to be
happened
franchise
exactly?
quarterback.
Why the drop? Because I am not familiar with his background.
I mean, he's gotten hurt. He's gotten hurt the last 2 years. And, last year when
Mm,
he played well. This year it was kind of mixed results. I think that game against Oklahoma hurt him. So
mm,
I understand him maybe wanting to go. He has the talent. And if he goes back to school next year in a weak quarterback class, he has a good year in 2024 at Texas, or if he transfers, yeah, he's going to be a first-round pick. He'll have another shot at being a first-round pick. The thing is, let's say, and I don't think he's going to become a first-round pick based off what he does against Oklahoma State, but it's kind of like what I just said with Michael Penix. He gets Texas this win, and they sneak into the college football playoff, and they play Georgia, and he goes off against Georgia. People are going to look at that and say, all right, this is the Quinn Ewers we saw coming out of high school. This is the first round pick we expected. Now, all of a sudden, maybe the narrative changes, the stock changes. He's starting to hear from NFL teams that, yeah, we would use a first round pick on you. And boom, he comes out of school. The way I kind of phrased it, and this is a little tongue in cheek, can he convince himself to declare for the draft? That's kind of what's at stake for him. But the only way he's going to do that, the only way that happens, is he wins this game and Texas gets in the college football playoff. And he's got to have a good showing, too. This is not a good Oklahoma State defense. They got to this point by scoring a ton of points. I'm blanking on the running back's name, Ollie, one of the best running backs in the nation, not draft eligible. He's a true sophomore, hence why I don't have his name off the top of my head. But, yeah, I think that for Ewers, there is something on the line here, even if he's considering going back to school.
Opportunities abound for Ewers. We'll see if he can actually capitalize. Next up, we got J.J. McCarthy in Michigan against Iowa. We talked about this one earlier today in the locker room. There's some pretty interesting context around this game if you want to fill in the audience.
Yeah, so I was either having the best disappointing season or the worst successful season in the history of maybe not just college football or football, but sports. So their offensive coordinator, Brian Ferentz, they've had a really bad few years on offense. And coming into this year, Ferentz needed to score, or not Ferentz, Iowa, it could have been defensive points. Iowa needed to score 250 points for Ferentz to keep his job, or his contract was going to void. They're going to come up well short. They've played in a lot of close games. They are, I think, outside the top 100 in scoring. They've only crossed the 20-point threshold, I believe, once. 4 of their games have set the record for the lowest scoring total betting-wise in college football history. Last week against Nebraska, the total was 24.5. It hit. I had that. That was awesome. But, this is the kind of team we're talking about. Yet they're ranked and they're playing for the conference title because their defense is that good. So Iowa winning the Big Ten would be hilarious. In a season that the fans hate, they might win the conference championship, which is the ultimate goal for 99% of college football teams. The college playoff is kind of like a cherry. And it might knock Michigan out of the playoffs. At the same time, for J.J. McCarthy, right? Here we go. Another good defense, a really good defense with NFL talent on the other side. Cooper DeJean, their number one corner. If he plays, I know he's banged up. He might actually be out for the season. I'm forgetting now. But this is another tough test for J.J. McCarthy. And if he wants to show that he can lead an NFL team, you got to beat Iowa. You got to beat Iowa good. This game is a 23.5-point spread. It's the biggest of any championship game. I don't know that Iowa's allowing 24 points. The highest point total they've allowed all year was 27 or 31 to Penn State earlier in the year. It was a blowout, but Iowa doesn't allow a lot of points. So Vegas thinks J.J. McCarthy can light up the scoreboard. We'll see. But it's another chance for him to kind of prove himself.
Do you think he's going to actually get the opportunity, or do you think Michigan's going to play a little more conservative like they did a couple weeks ago and just be like, all right, we're going to lean on our run game. We're going to sprinkle you in every once in a while. Or do you think they're going to say, all right, we may have to throw the ball just to make sure this is more competitive against good defense? Where do you see that going?
It's tough to say just because they've gone both ways. They took the ball out of his hands against Penn State. They put it in his hands a little more against Ohio State. I think it comes down to if it's close or not. I think they may try to, if they can run the ball and get up a couple scores early, they'll keep running. If Iowa can show something on offense, which I wouldn't count on it, or just their defense plays outstanding against the run, then yeah, they're going to have to throw the ball. They're going to have to do it.
Yep. All right. Next up, we got Carson Beck in Georgia against Alabama. As we said, Jalen Milroe came up with a crazy win last week, so it should be a fun game. I was talking to your co-host Brian about Carson Beck, and he was saying like this isn't just any run-in-the-mill Georgia quarterback that we usually think of, where basically the team is carrying this guy who makes plays every once in a while, but he's not really the star. This is Carson Beck is kind of in a different category. What are your thoughts there, and how do you see this game playing out?
Carson Beck's another really interesting one because he was he's a 4-star recruit, but he wasn't a top 10 quarterback in his class. Don't get me wrong, the guy's not a scrub. He's not coming out of nowhere. He's not a walk-on, but he's not. A lot of these guys we're talking about, May, Williams, Bo Nix, even though he got there a little bit weird. These are like 5-star blue chip from the time they were sophomores in high school, were highly recruited, quarterbacks. That's not what Carson Beck is. And when he stepped in, the expectation was he was going to basically pick up where Stetson Bennett left off. He was going to be a point guard, a distributor. He was just going to kind of be there and not mess up. And he was just going to kind of lead the offense. But you saw Brock Bowers miss time, Ladd McConkey miss time, their two best receivers, yet the offense still produced. And Carson Beck was a big part of that. So you see that happen. Those guys come back. The offense really starts clicking. And I'm like, all right, what's going on here? So you take a closer look at Carson Beck, 6'4", 225, throws a great ball. Between his size, the way he throws the ball, the mechanics, the release point, he's throwing fastballs. He's throwing heaters. There's a ton of zip on the ball. He can get the ball down the field. Now, his accuracy isn't great, and that comes with time. He's not as accurate as you'd like him to be. I'm not going to say he's unathletic, but in the NFL, he's a pocket passer. Like, he can maneuver within the pocket, and he'll make the first rusher miss if he sees him. His legs are never going to be a plus. It's just not his game. But the way you see him throw the ball, okay, this may work. He still may be able to play at that pro level. So I don't know. Like, I don't think he's a first round pick. I don't think he's a top 50 pick. I don't think he's an obvious potential franchise guy. Could he get there? Maybe down the road. I'm not gonna say he can't, but like, that's not the kind of guy you're looking at. But he coming into the year, nobody was talking about him for the draft. He's a redshirt junior. Everybody thought he was going back to school. Of course he would. Now it's like, all right, he's entering that fringe top 100 spot. He goes out, beats up on an Alabama defense that's playing as well as any defense in the country right now. You're going to start hearing him talked about as like a day 2 guy, as a top 100 guy, as somewhere in that 50 to 100 range. And you really don't have that guy in this draft. Those guys who are supposed to be the day 2, late day 2, day 3 intermediate guys. There's another one we'll get to in a bit, but they've either ascended like Jaden Daniels did, they're going back to school like we think Quinn Ewers is, or they fell off. Like guys like DJ Uyunglele is a name that comes to mind there. Or KJ Jefferson entered the transfer portal. He was kind of supposed to be in that range. I'm blanking on other names. I know there's a couple in there, but like you don't Cam Ward's probably going to go. Joe Milton sort of fell off. So you don't have that guy. Carson Beck can be that guy. Let's see what he does against Alabama. I'm not saying he's there yet, but he does well against Alabama. They're going to go to the playoff one way or the other. Let's see what he does against one of these playoff teams. If the Patriots are going to go, wide receiver tackle to start the draft and just say, you know what, we're going to give Mac Jones one more year. We're going to bring in a developmental guy. Carson Beck could kind of be that guy. I don't think his ceiling's that high. Like, I think he's and I know these names won't excite people, but you got to think of them as prospects, not what they are now. He has a chance to be like the Davis Mills or the Kyle Trask of this draft. Okay. If this was 15 years ago, we're talking about him as a potential first-round pick because he's really good throwing the ball from the pocket. Doesn't do much beyond that, and you need to do that now, but he's a guy that's going to interest some NFL teams. The question is how much? Is it enough that he's willing to go to the draft instead of going back to school? Big performance against Alabama. I think there's a good chance he enters the draft, and I think there's a good chance he goes in the top 100.
Yeah, this does sound like a big opportunity because you talk about a guy who has great size, is accurate, is a pocket passer, like you said a little while ago. That's fine. We'll work on the accuracy, but now if you're not able to move and the accuracy is going to be a problem, then okay, where exactly do we want to take you? And yeah, we'll see how he does against Bama. All right. Last one of the previews before we get to a little bonus section a little bit.
Yeah.
We got Tulane and Michael Pratt against SMU. Now, I'm not very familiar with Michael Pratt. I don't watch a lot of Tulane football. I'm sorry. I see we do have some Tulane people in the chat, though, represent. But yeah, break this one down for all of the uninitiated.
Yeah, shout out Tulane. I love New Orleans. Fun city. So yeah, I wasn't super familiar with Pratt either. I kind of did some more work on him this week. So the first thing you notice with Pratt, true senior 4-year starter. Well, he took over 4 games into his freshman year at Tulane. He's been the starter the whole time. The last 2 years, Tulane's been a wagon. They've arguably been the best group of 5 team in college football. So that's like non-power 5. And with Pratt, I think there's some things that stand out with that experience. He's made the most of that experience. He sees the field really well. I think he's a guy that's very comfortable in the pocket, that sits really well in the pocket, throws a really accurate ball, he puts it on guys. Now, down the field, he doesn't quite have that downfield presence you're maybe looking for. And again, he's a better athlete than Beck. He can move around a little bit, but he's not a guy I don't think is going to be like a plus. You're not going to design the running game for him. I look at him, again, as a prospect. I see a lot of Bailey Zappi. Now, Bailey Zappi had the numbers at Western Kentucky because that was that offense. Pratt doesn't quite have those numbers, but, he can get back, make the read, get the ball out quick, deliver the football. And as a high-end backup, potential, bridge starter in the NFL, he's in that again. Him and Beck he's kind of a little more low floor, high floor, low ceiling option to what Carson Beck is. But some people are going to really like him because they're going to see a guy that's played a lot of ball, that, has that high football IQ and throws the ball where the coaches want to throw. And some teams may look at that and say, hey, we can make this work. We'll go out, we'll get a good tight end, good intermediate receiving tight end, put a running back behind him. It's not like the JJ McCarthy, Bo Nix thing where he's just going to be a distributor. You really need pieces around him, but there might be some teams that look at him and say, we're going to bring him in. He's going to be very valuable in the room because he's played a lot of football. He has that high football IQ. And we'll see what he can turn into, but at the very worst, we would trust giving the offense to him if we're in a spot where we need a backup for 3 or 4 games or something like that. So I know that doesn't sound like much. It's quarterback. Those guys still go in the top 100, definitely in the top 150, sometimes in the top 100. And again, you don't really have – you have Caleb Williams is in tier 1. Drake May's in halfway between tier 1 and tier 2 with Jaden Daniels. They're kind of passing each other. You have the Penix, Bo Nix group. JJ McCarthy's a wild card. And then that's kind of it. And then you have these two and then a bunch of day 3 guys. So if somebody doesn't want to invest a premium pick in a quarterback, but doesn't want a guy that's a total flyer either, I think that in this case, again, to put them together, Beck is certainly one of those guys. And I think Michael Pratt's a guy, different quarterback, but a guy's that's going to be in that window as well. So I don't know, for the Patriots, these 2 guys to me, I don't know that either of these guys are the pick is you're giving to as the future of the franchise. But if they want to try another year with Mac and just have a better plan B than Bailey Zappi or just a new plan B, or if they want to do the, Washington RG3 Kirk Cousins thing, 1 in the first, 1 in the fourth might be a little low. Maybe they move up or maybe one of these guys falls. But I think these are the guy. I've seen a lot of people ask about the RG3 Kirk Cousins thing. Could the Patriots do that? And look, they may need a new backup. Bailey Zappi comes out this week and sucks. And it's all right, he's not the guy. You may need a draft starter and a backup. It's not ideal. Both those guys are rookies, but I think these are the guys however you want to frame it. Beck and Pratt are the guys you're looking at kind of in that range.
And when you
Beck could maybe move up if he, really plays well next couple games, could potentially move up into that next tier. But I don't think I'm talking about 400 yards, 5 touchdowns, no picks.
Right. I'm saying if you need the deep cuts, if you need the quarterbacks behind the quarterbacks everybody else is talking about, you come to the show and you come to Alex Barth. And in the next section, we're going to be previewing some guys who aren't quarterbacks. Some of the best players who are draft eligible that we're going to be seeing this weekend in these championship games. Before we get to that, though, going to throw it to our friends at SeatGeek. We'll be back. Self-proclaimed Swiftie, I have been dying to see Taylor Swift perform in person, but I'm gonna have to do so at a reasonable price once the season's over. And to find the best deal on Taylor Swift tickets, I use today's sponsor, SeatGeek. With over 28 million downloads, SeatGeek is the #1 rated ticket app. There's more than 70,000 events every single day on SeatGeek, including concerts, sports, festivals, and more. I actually used SeatGeek last year to see a Clippers game with my girlfriend, and with the NFL, NBA, and NHL seasons in full swing, you don't want to miss out, and SeatGeek has your tickets to every single game. Plus, artists like Travis Scott are on tour right now. They put all the tickets across the web in one place to make sure you're getting a good deal. Every ticket is backed by their buyer guarantee, and SeatGeek is the only site that lets you return your tickets ahead of the event with swaps. And you know I came through for you guys. Use my code DREAMERSPRO for $20 off tickets at SeatGeek. That's $20 off your first purchase with promo code DREAMERSPRO. Make sure you click the link in the description to download the app. All right, so like I said, to close out some of the guys who are going to be playing and are draft eligible, who are going to be playing this weekend and should be on your radar. First up, we got a couple big boys out of Georgia. Alex, who you got?
Yeah, so again, I just remind people, like, it's not a lock the Patriots are going to take a quarterback, and these are like, look, especially the SEC championship, right? You want to know the draft eligible players to watch. Look at the depth chart; it's all of them. But these are the, first round picks you want to get yourself familiar with. From Georgia, Brock Bowers, the tight end we've talked about. Real do-it-all tight end. There's a reason he's drawing comparisons to Gronk. I think it might be a little early for that stuff, but he can catch, he can run routes, he's good with the ball in his hands, he can block. He's going to be a top 10 pick. And then Amarius Mims is their starting tackle. I think with Mims, if the Patriots don't go alter for Fashanu, but we talked about this thing where they maybe trade down a little bit, then trade back up into the first round. Amarius Mims is a guy that is going to be, and we'll talk about another guy that's going to be in this conversation as well. But Amarius Mims is a guy you're going to potentially talk about, that sort of situation. 6'7", 340. He's mostly played on the right side for Georgia, but probably, if you maybe bring him along as a left tackle. So for all you tackle people, if it's not alter for Fashanu and they might go a little lower. Well, again, so if it's not, if you want them to take a quarterback or take Marvin Harrison Jr. and still get a first round tackle, Amarius Mims is one potential option that we'll be playing this week. And there's another guy in this game, Taylor from Alabama's J.C. Latham. Latham right now is ranked a little higher. He's a fringe top 10 pick, so this one may be a bit of a stretch if they're going to do trade down, trade up. But Latham's just an absolute mauler. I mean, he is a Patriots tackle through and through. He is 6'6", 360, plays. I assume, I bet he's a very nice kid, plays like an a-hole, plays with a mean streak.
We love that.
He won't let guys get their hands on him. Yeah, I'm looking at his. I actually think there's a chance. We talk about guys kind of jumping tiers, right? So there's Alton Fashanu at the top. Latham, it would not surprise me if he works his way into that group, and we're talking about 3 elite tackles instead of 2. I don't know that we're there right now, but I think there's a real possibility we could get there. So maybe Latham's a little unrealistic in terms of the trade down, trade up, but definitely a guy, if you want the Patriots to take a tackle in the first round, this is a guy you should know about.
Yeah, I feel every single draft podcast show, whatever, everybody's like, there's a ton of good tackles. Like, we're going to see more tackles go in the first round than we have in a long time. It feels like maybe not now more than ever, you're not finding athletic left tackles all over the place. But it feels like there's a pretty desperate need all over the league. And I'm really curious about these guys because, like you said, they're both right tackles. Patriots, God willing, are going to re-sign Mike Onwenu, and he's your right tackle. So I am curious if these are guys who could switch over to the left side and be just as good just because they fit the mold of a Patriots right tackle. Ginormous guys who can just move people and be assets in the ground game. But these guys also have the athleticism where they can hold up well in pass protection. So I'm really curious how that's going to go. While we're already on Alabama, let's go with Dallas Turner. Give us a little preview on him, the edge rusher.
Yeah, so look, Alabama edge rushers, it's one of the spots, and they're known for a lot of spots producing a ton of talent, but this guy stepped into Will Anderson's role. They had 2 of them last year. It was really unbelievable, but real chance, I think, Dallas Turner to be the first defensive player off the board in this draft. And look, we can't rule out, especially if Bill Belichick comes back, them taking defense first with their first pick. And Josh Uche is going to be gone. Anthony Jennings might be gone. Matthew Judon's in his 30s, entering last year's contract, coming off an injury. They need an edge rusher. I'm not saying they should use their first pick on it, but if they feel that way, Dallas Turner's a hell of a player. That he looks like Will Anderson. Like, he clearly learned a lot from Will Anderson. They're similar guys, freak athletes, very flexible, high motor, like anything you want from an edge rusher, Dallas Turner is going to give you. So another guy to watch. And I just think we'll see how much they move him around a little bit. We'll see how much he lines up on Amarius Mims, because that's one of those spots where, like, when you go, if Amarius Mims can put out good tape against Dallas Turner, you're going to look at that and say, here's what he's doing against the guy who's probably going to be a stud in the NFL. Like, how does he hold up in that matchup? I think that pairing specifically, again, we'll see how much it happens. They move their front around a little bit, but Dallas Turner on Amarius Mims is certainly a matchup to watch when we get it.
Yeah, and the Patriots at edge position is a much more glaring area to me than people realize. You mentioned Judon. You got Josh Uche, who did suffer an injury, but like really hasn't been the force that you would hope from somebody who is strictly a pass rusher pretty much. Sometimes drops in the coverage, sometimes plays run, but really that's his bread and butter. And you've seen what happened to the Patriots pass rush once Matt Judon went out. So, and edge rushers are one of the highest paid positions in football. So if you can get one of those guys on a rookie contract, as well as like a quarterback and a receiver or a tackle, you're in good shape. So definitely want to look for. Now we're going to go to FSU with two guys who are freak athletes at the receiver position, but one is a wide receiver and one is more of an athlete. Tell us about Keon Coleman and Johnny Wilson.
So Keon Coleman is in the conversation for that wide receiver 2 spot behind Marvin Harrison Jr. And it's really going to come down to, I'm going to combine a couple of games we're going to talk about here. Coleman, Rome Odunze, and then Malik Neighbors, who's not playing this weekend, but he's also in the conversation. Like, who is the wide receiver 2? I think it's a bit of a flavor thing. I think they're all very good players. What do you want? Keon Coleman is, we were talking earlier, there's some DeAndre Hopkins in his game. Like, he's at his core, he's a big body, true X, jump ball, 50-50 receiver, but he's more athletic than most of those guys are. He's a guy that has an ability to create after the catch with the ball in his hands. He's a better route runner than you'd expect. I think Rome Odunze, you want a technician. You want a guy that's going to run excellent routes. You want a guy that reads the ball really well at the catch point. You want a guy that can get himself open with route running and body control. That's Rome Odunze. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Stephon Diggs watching him. I think kind of similar players. Or do you just want an athlete? Do you want the guy that can run the fastest, jump the highest, has the most agility, just the guy that you're going to mold, right? That's Malik Neighbors from LSU. So that whole battle is kind of playing out through these, these next couple games, and we'll see if Neighbors plays in the bowl game. I'm curious to ask you, I don't know how much you've watched, Coleman, just because I don't know how much you watched, Jordan Travis, who unfortunately obviously is out for the year. He had that serious leg injury. Like, where you're at with those three guys, and specifically for the Patriots. Because, like, I want Odunze. I want the Patriots to get their own Stephon Diggs, because we've seen what Stephon Diggs can do for a quarterback. Off the field stuff, brother tweeting aside, right? Right. Like you said, what he did to JC Jackson. But I'm really curious where you are on it, because I feel like I love seeing how people break down the wide receiver 2 conversation, because everybody I read has a slightly different take on it. It's really fascinating to me.
Yeah, so I think Rome, like I think we talked about it, he reminds me of DeAndre Hopkins, like just because he's that guy who can stick at X and he can, he can win one-on-one.
Or Coleman?
Well, I honestly kind of both. So they're a little different. So with Rome, I think he's like the DeAndre Hopkins type, where you stick him at X and you want him to win one-on-one, but you can also put him in the slot if you're an empty or something like that, where you can create some other matchups, just because he's so good technically and also has the physical gifts. Keon Coleman, honestly, reminds me of N'Keal Harry, and I think part of it's like the size. No, but like, I'm sorry.
For every Patriots fan, I know what you meant as a prospect, but.
Right. And like N'Keal Harry, if he was who we thought he was, like at the speed that you saw when he was really doing great in college, if that translated to the NFL, or it was just, he actually had it to begin with, that's what reminds me of, because you see the punt returning skills from Keon Coleman. That was one of the things where I'm like, okay, you can use this guy in different ways. And then the work at the catch point, like whatever you want to say about N'Keal, he was always dominant at the catch point. He didn't get a lot of opportunities because of the Patriots scheme. if you go back and look at like his deep targets, you're not seeing it like go off his hands or anything. Like he had the size and he won those battles. But I think Keon Coleman is someone, and again, like this is why I don't want to get too deep in the weeds because I haven't studied these guys enough to just give confident takes where I'm like, this is who he is. But in the games that I've seen, it's just the ability to catch point, the athleticism, the explosiveness, and the size. They're the things that you were sold on with N'Keal Harry, where he's not just, this guy who's great before and at the catch point. He can also make stuff happen with the ball in his hands. I think that's really exciting. I feel like after the catch stuff, maybe from what I've seen, he might have the edge on Rome. But again, could definitely study more. And then who else were we mentioning? I guess
back to the Florida State guys real quick on Coleman and then Johnny Wilson, who you talked about. Johnny Wilson's a really interesting player. He's 6'7", 240. Supposedly ran a 4.42 in high school. So you look at it and you're like, this guy's bigger than a tight end. He's faster than most wide receivers. Why isn't he in the conversation? He can't catch. He's had a massive problem with drops this year. So, can you coach that out of him? Maybe, but he's still a fascinating player. I think Florida State's in this really interesting position where they're undefeated. If they beat Louisville, they'll be an unbeaten conference champion that should probably get in, but they're on a backup quarterback. Will the committee put them in at risk of a bad game? And I think, no disrespect, I'm blanking on his name, to Florida State's backup quarterback, but he's not Jordan Travis. And I think these wide receivers, and really the tight end, Jaheim Bell, who's a projected top 100 pick, Trey Benson's their running back. He's going to be one of the first running backs off the board this year. They've got to show that they make the offense go. And I think it's really on Keon Coleman and Johnny Wilson to carry, against a good Louisville defense, to carry this team into that college football playoff spot.
Yep. And while we're on the topic of receivers, we might as well get to Troy Franklin. I feel like he's going to remind people of Taekwon because he's tall, he's thin, and he
reminds
fast.
Me of Taekwon.
Right, but here's the thing. He's actually elusive. Like what Taekwon never had was that you give him a bubble screen and he's going to like make guys miss. That was never him. It's more you give him a lane and he'll explode through it. But he wasn't one of those guys who was going to beat you horizontally or like really twitched up. And additionally, he didn't have the same prowess, I think, against press coverage, where you don't want Troy Franklin living outside for sure, but he's more competitive in those situations than a Taekwon Thornton. I haven't watched his route running closely enough, so I don't want to compare them in that vein. But if you're talking about, like, at the very least, a gadget guy who, or at least you, like, scheme touches for him and kind of make his life easier, I think you're going to get much more out of Troy Franklin than you are currently getting or even could possibly get out of a Taekwon Thornton, as well as having the vertical ability. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on him and where the differences are and just as him as his own player, where he stands.
I worry about, again, just for the Patriots, that thin, lanky, speedy receiver. Let somebody else develop. Let's on Troy Franklin. That's where I'm at with the Patriots.
I agree. By the way, I agree.
They just tried with this guy. I think, to me, if you're in that range of the draft, and we can add some of the Texas guys here too, we're kind of in that next tier, late first round, early second round receivers. Xavier Worthy from Texas, who, yes, is tall and skinny, but I think he's a much better player than Troy Franklin is. He's such a good route runner. He's so good at the catch point. A.D. Mitchell, also from Texas, is 6'4", 216. He is that true X guy that transferred from Georgia, has some that SEC pedigree. Go after, again, to go back to Worthy, I feel like Troy Franklin wins with his speed. He can do other things, but he has to win with his speed. And those guys, especially coming from the Pac-12, which is the slowest conference, as Evan Lazar will tell you, they have trouble translating to the NFL. Whereas Worthy can win with his quickness. He can win with his route running. Mitchell can win with his release. He can win with his size. He can win with his strength. Those are the kind of guys I want to see the Patriots investing in. I don't need just a true burst burner. They just did that and it didn't work. And honestly, I don't know about that guy. I think that guy's a really good number 2 or 3. I think if your number 1 receiver is going to win on speed primarily, he has to be Tyreek Hill. Like he has to be so freaking. And
even Tyreek doesn't just win with speed. It's that his speed is insane, but like even he's not an actual one-trick pony.
So I don't think hot take. I don't think Troy Franklin's Tyreek Hill. I don't think he's 6'3" Tyreek Hill. So let another team take a shot on him.
Totally fair. All right, we're going to go back to Washington with our last player, Braylon Trice, edge rusher. What do we got?
Big time, like assuming it's the current Patriots making the pick, like big time Patriots draft pick. 3 down, stout, edge setting, no nonsense, bull rushing. Yeah, exactly. Kind of reminds me Keon White. I think he's more polished so Keon White, right, was a tight end, moved over. I think Braylon Trice is a better prospect, coming from a better program, more polished at the position, more experience, all of that, but just like a big, imposing presence on the edge. Probably I don't want to say he's a better athlete than Keon White, but like he's quicker. He can be more of that backside pass rusher if you need him to be. That's probably not his ideal role in the NFL, but I look at what he does against the run. I look at what he does as an imposing presence. I don't really know where the Patriots pick him because he's supposed to be a mid-first round pick. So I just don't know how that fits in their plans, but you never know. And hey, if you like watching offensive linemen get bullied, if you like watching offensive linemen get their lunch handed to them, you'll enjoy watching Braylon Trice. So maybe not as much of a Patriots one as some of these other guys, but if you want to have fun watching the game, check out number 8. You might enjoy yourself.
I do think, honestly, the Patriots, I mean, it's so hard to project, like, who is a good fit or not because we don't know who's going to be running this team next year. But in terms of, like, those big, like, stout guys who can really play all 3 downs, I think, like, Keon White he has that potential, hasn't quite lived up to it yet. Obviously, that was, like, the whole thing with him. And then you think of, like, a Dietrich Wise who, he can play every down. He has the scheme versatility, but he's also getting up there in age and is a guy where you'd like to have somebody who could probably take over and kind of be in that role. Sam Roberts also there as well, but not the same pedigree of player. But I think this is our longest show yet. I had a blast. Thank you so much, Alex. What do you got coming out this week? Let the people know.
I'll have, I don't know when it's dropping because there's going to be a video element with it we got to get done. I will have a championship weekend breakdown just like this. We'll get into some of the top quarterbacks, some of the top other players, some of the not top players at some of these programs. There's a corner from Toledo everybody should know about. And I'll also have some Army-Navy preview stuff if people want to start getting into that. Went to the press conference today, and you want to talk about football, guys. The way the coaches talked about this game was really fun. So I'll have something on that too. And Catch 22 tomorrow with Evan Lazar.
Great stuff as always from you, buddy. Thank you so much once again. Thank you all so much for watching. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. We're going to see